Okay, welcome everyone to today's Google Webmaster Central and Google News Office Hours Hangouts. We have Stacy with us, who's going to present something to you and help answer your Google News specific questions.
Okay, great. Thanks so much, John. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on where in the world you are. The Google News team is very excited that all of you are joining us. And again, we thank the Webmaster Tools team for letting us be a guest appearance, again, in your office hours. For those of you who did join the first one where Google News presented, that was much more of an introductory overview. Today's presentation is primarily going to focus on the new Google News Publisher Center, which is a very exciting tool for our team to enable publishers to glean a lot more information about how their information is being used by our Google News team. So John, could you bring up the presentation? Excellent. Great. So like I said, today we're going to be focusing on how to use the Google News Publisher Center. I'm Stacy Chan. I'm the community manager for Google News. And there's my Twitter handle if you feel so inclined to tweet during this presentation. Okay, great. Next slide, please, John. All right, so what is the Google News Publisher Center? We developed this tool back in August because we had heard from publishers that they felt that we weren't being as transparent as we possibly could. So this tool is really the one-stop shop for publishers to manage their account in Google News. So you can do things like quickly and easily updating your site's information, and we felt that this tool is extremely important to help us better improve the discovery and classification of your news content. Barry's saying that you guys can't see the presentation. Okay, you guys can see it now. Great. Thumbs up from Barry. So largely, since August when the Google News Publisher Center launched, we've gotten really great feedback. We've seen a lot of usage from over 60,000 publishers who are in the Google News database because the Publisher Center is now available in every language and country that Google News is in. So one testimonial from a publisher was, before the Publisher Center, I had no idea what news sections Google News was crawling from. Now I'm assured that my articles are crawled and in the proper place. And that's the sentiment we hope that every publisher has. If you haven't checked out the Google News Publisher Center, please do. I will go over those steps and how to do so in the following slides. Next slide, please. So here's the URL. Hopefully you guys are watching in a browser where you can open another tab. Please check it out. This is the screenshot that you'll first see when you open up this link, whether or not you're in Google News. So as you can see, I am the owner of stacychan.com, for example. This is the screenshot that I see. I have been a verified owner of stacychan.com. However, because that site is not in Google News, it's clearly not a news site, you'll see that there's a button where I can actually request inclusion in Google News. And you'll see more than one site if you own more than one site in Webmaster Tools. And if your site is in Google News, you'll actually see different buttons under that Details and Sections column. So next slide, please. This is what you see, actually, when you click on the Details button. That image on the left will show various pieces of information. The four most important components to be a site in Google News are your name, your site URL, your country, and your language. And the country and language are really important for us to determine which edition in Google News you should be. So for example, an edition is the Canadian French edition or the Canadian English edition. It's always a combo of your site's country and language. Now moving to the right side, this is what you see when you click on the Sections button in the Publisher Center. Your news sections are the different URLs where your news content lives. Usually those are just subdomains of your main site. Next slide, please. Another thing you can do in the Publisher Center is apply relevant labels at the source level and at the section level. What the source level labels tell us is what type of site as a whole your new site is. So for example, if your site is a blog, you'll usually see a blog label there. Or if you're a satire site like The Onion, that will get applied to your whole site. Over on the right side, your section labels start getting a little more granular. You apply labels to your news section. So you tell us if that FIFA World Cup site is a sports site. So it can help us better classify your news articles within the sections in Google News. And if you see at the top of that image, there's a little button that said Add Editor's Pick. I'll go over what that new feature is. Next slide, please. The lights just dimmed. So Editor's Picks is a very, very cool feature, we think, on the Google News homepage. It's actually my favorite section because it's the one widget on the homepage where editors have complete control over what articles appear in their Editor's Picks. So that's why we call Editor's Picks your can't-miss stories. Our team doesn't provide any editorial judgment on what appears in that widget. Those are completely selected by your publications, and it's up to 5 articles that you think deserve to be there. What we've heard from publishers is that these stories tend to be the evergreen stories, or the stories that you thought would have gotten a lot more traffic yesterday, and you want to get more clicks out of that story. So you put that in your Editor's Picks. And we say potentially can appear on the homepage because every homepage for every user looks different. Especially as more and more users start to personalize their home pages. So for example, this is a screenshot of mine. The New Yorker, for me, is a preferred source because I love reading them. And so as a user, I've made the New Yorker a preferred source, so I'm much more likely to see the New Yorker's Editor's Picks on my personal homepage. Next slide, please. So now that I've explained what Editor's Picks feeds are, how do you go about creating one? And how do you go about submitting one through the Publisher Center? So it's very simple. It's just a standard RSS feed to create this Editor's Picks feed. We even have a template in our Help Center that you can just copy and paste and then substitute out those 5 links to your articles. And again, it's 5 hand-picked stories. The only requirement that we ask is that they're journalistic articles, that they're not ads or spammy articles or anything like that. And so I don't know if you can copy and paste that link from a slide, but there it is. Or you can just visit the Google News Help Center and just search for Editor's Picks feed, and you can take a look at the standard RSS feed template. Okay, next slide, please. So how to submit this? So again, going back to that screenshot from within the Publisher Center, you would just click on the Add Editor's Pick button, and you'll get either one of 2 messages after you copy and paste your RSS feed's URL. You'll get, congratulations, your Editor's Picks feed has been submitted successfully, and there's really nothing more you have to do on your end. You'll see your Editor's Picks feed listed as one of your news sections. Or if you submit your RSS feed and there are errors, you'll get the message. Unfortunately, there are errors which will prevent your Editor's Picks feed from displaying. And then below, you'll see a list of various errors that could possibly be wrong. Okay, next slide, please. And so I just wanted to share a case study from one publisher who did implement Editor's Picks. The Gawker team owns 9 different properties, and they created an Editor's Picks feed from Gizmodo to Gawker to all their other publications. And you can read the article there. I included the link. But the most intriguing thing for our team after they did this case study, completely independently, they just shared it with us and we thought it was really neat. There was an obvious increase in traffic, so quantitatively that was a huge benefit. But also on the quality side, they said that the traffic they were getting from the Editor's Picks was much better. They found that a lot of these readers were new readers to their site, and that these readers spent 60% longer reading their articles than their other readers who did not come through editor's picks. And the way we do that is once you create the editor's picks, we'll actually append the CGI parameter for you at the end of all your editor's picks article URLs. So you'll see the direct traffic coming from these 5 stories. Thank you, Barry, for listing the Help Center link to, I can't remember which article I just mentioned, to the editor's picks feed. Okay, next slide, please. So the second part of the presentation is now that I've told you all these great things you can do within the Publisher Center. How do you access this? So you go to that link, like I had mentioned in the other slide, check it out, and the first step, next slide please, is to make sure your site is in Google News. You can still access that link as I showed you. I, as a personal individual, I'm not in Google News, but I could request inclusion for stacychan.com if I wanted to. If you're not in Google News, go ahead and apply. The second step is, next slide please. Oh, that looked a little funky. You have to verify ownership of your site in Webmaster Tools. You just go to that link, google.com/webmaster/tools, and you'll see the different sites that you own. So you can see there, that would be a screenshot if I hadn't verified ownership of stacychan.com. There's a neat little blue link, and the Webmaster team is very great about walking you through all the steps to verify ownership. The 2 methods that Google News prefers are, one, the domain name provider method, or secondly, the HTML file verification method.
But
Mm-hmm.
just like the HTML verification, it's not the same as the first one, right? Because there's when you submit your original website in the Webmaster Tools, you get that HTML verification. It won't overwrite the other one that I have in the FTP, right?
That's a good question, Brooke. So we prefer the domain name provider method because, in a sense, we want you to prove ownership at the highest level. So you can prove ownership of www.stacychan.com, but we'd really prefer you to prove ownership of http://stacychan.com, and then everything that falls below that at a subdomain level, you would then have access to. So yes, those aren't exactly the same. We prefer in order that first one, the domain name provider method.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and number 3, and then you just have to log in with the same email account that you use to prove ownership of your site in Webmaster Tools. So please check out the Publisher Center, and for the most part, it's a very self-serve tool. We hope to start overlaying many, many more features in the Publisher Center. It's really the foundation of how we view our communications with all the publishers that are in Google News. So we have more features coming down the pipeline. Nothing I can announce publicly yet, but stay tuned for more. And I believe I have one more slide, John. Okay, and there's a few more help resources in case you guys have any further questions or you want to do a little more light bedtime reading. The Help Center is a treasure trove of information. I highlighted those 2 sections that have information specifically about the Publisher Center that you can read more. The Google News Help Forum, you can find me on there, as well as our Google News top contributors who are our experts. They're daily answering many of your questions, as well as just having lively discussions too. Feel free to post anything about Google News. You can suggest product improvements or feature suggestions, pretty much anything. And then finally, last slide, I believe. Just want to give a quick plug for our Google News newsletter. We actually sent out the inaugural newsletter last month in January, which featured an introduction to the Publisher Center, much of the same information that is actually in this presentation, but also product updates like we'll actually crawl your off-domain images now. We talked about editor's picks, and we're actually getting ready for our second Google News newsletter, which we're sending out probably in Q2, early April, around there. So we highly suggest that you read it. There are a few ways you can get it in your inbox. The first one is to, one, make sure your site is in Google News. And to actually get it to your inbox, you have to prove ownership of your site in Webmaster Tools, similar to the step that I detailed about getting access to your Publisher Center. And don't worry, even if your site is not in Google News, we post the newsletter in the Help Center and the forum, so you can still read all that information. And lastly, the first newsletter that we sent, oh, sorry, John, one quick point. The last newsletter that we sent out in January was only in English, French, Italian, and German. This newsletter, we're going to try to translate it into many, many more languages so we can reach as many of our publishers as we possibly can. Baruch, you want it in Russian. All right, we'll try to do Russian as well. Okay, so that about wraps up the presentation portion. So we can open it up to questions. But I did get a great question from a publisher in Vancouver that I quickly wanted to go over. She was asking, and John can probably help me out with this, she was asking about the errors that you see in your Webmaster Tools account. This is probably the go-to place to determine if one of your news articles wasn't crawled. We'll actually list the specific URL and what error it generates. And she was asking if we could surface those errors in a more timely manner, but in reality, those errors are surfaced in pretty much as real time as it gets. We generate those errors based on the articles that you submit in your sitemap, so we really can't get those errors much faster. John, did you have any other comment about those errors?
Yeah, I think the sitemaps team is really good at processing the sitemaps files and finding errors in the sitemap files and bringing that up essentially as quickly as possible. So that's a kind of a great place to get that information.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and John actually mentioned a good point to me and our Google News team. You could have an error on every single one of your articles that doesn't penalize or do anything like of that sort to your site as a whole, right, John?
Yeah. So this is a common question we get from webmasters in particular is, like, I have 10,000 crawl errors on my website. Is this a problem or not? And in general, if these are crawl errors for URLs that you don't want to have indexed, then that's perfectly fine. And that won't negatively affect the rest of your website's ranking. So just because you have some parts of your site with errors, those are specific to those individual URLs. They wouldn't be affecting the rest of your site's ranking.
Great, thanks, John. Okay, so I think that was the only question that I got personally ahead of time. So happy to open it up. I think, John, that's where you manage the questions.
All right. I think there are some Google News questions that were submitted in the Q&A. Let me try to run through them. I don't know if I'll surprise you with these. We'll see. Does Google News use in schema.org markup in any way?
How do you mean? Can you clarify that question in any way, like during the extraction and crawl process?
Yeah, so I guess, let's see, the rest of the question here is, my observations indicate that it doesn't. I see article too long errors and newsbot crawl errors. Even the title, headline, actual article body are marked by schema.org/article markup. So using structured data markup to essentially define which part of the page is the article.
That's a very good question. I think it really varies article by article. I'm not sure who asked that question, but happy to take that offline and work with you individually and take a look at your site.
That might also be something, I guess, that he could post in the forum. And
yes, that would actually be great. Thanks for the reminder, John.
There's also content that specifically my site, that I specifically do not include in the sitemap for the newsfeed because they're like daily recaps, and they also come up in the Google News site errors, crawl errars, as like, article fragmented or have problems with the article. I specifically do not want them to be included in Google News, but the Google Webmaster crawl errors page shows news errors for it when it shouldn't be included. Is there a way to exclude content from Google News where it doesn't show up on Google Webmaster Tools?
Is there a way to exclude Google News content so it doesn't show up on Webmaster Tools? So really, where we're crawling from are those news sections that you list in the Publisher Center. I think what publishers sometimes forget is that we'll crawl almost everything on the page. So a lot of publishers think that, well, I listed the home URL on, xyz.com/business, but there's a lot of other links on that xyz.com/business that may not be a news article that will attempt to extract. So I think publishers should be very careful about what articles they include in each section, but that's why you can also use robots, because we realize a news section isn't going to be 100% news articles. We want the page to be very robust with all sorts of content, and we completely get that. So robots is a very safe way to exclude that non-news content that you don't want showing up in Google News. Or you could always use sitemap only crawl, which is also equally accepted.
Sitemap only crawl?
Yes. So instead of, okay, the lights keep dimming off in my room. I apologize. Instead of listing all of your news sections in the Publisher Center, you can tell us that you only want us to crawl articles from your sitemap, not news sections at all. And you can actually do that through the Publisher Center by contacting us, because then we'll have to then note that you want to only be crawled from your sitemap. You can also you can submit a sitemap through your Webmaster Tools account, and we'll crawl that in addition to your news sections. But if you're really concerned that we're crawling non-news content, I would suggest submitting a sitemap and letting us know that you want us to only crawl the articles from that sitemap.
Will do. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Can a press release be picked up by Google News?
Yes, the press release can, but only if the press release lives on a site that is in Google News. And we do accept press release sites. You even saw from a screenshot on a slide during the presentation. That is a label that we have for sources. Yes, so the short answer is yes. We don't allow individual articles to be crawled, though. So if you're a PR agency that is trying to get a press release circulated on Google News, you would have to actually have a website that is first accepted.
Okay, here's one about the sitemaps. The unknown news site error in News XML Sitemaps tab keeps popping up for several of my sites and disappears when I resubmit. All the site names are matched to their names in the Google News database. Is this a known bug?
No, it's not a known bug. We do get this error a lot of times from publishers. I would have to take a look at your exact site, but you did address the main cause of this for most publishers, is that the name doesn't match the name that we have in our database. But the great news is with the Publisher Center, it's so much easier for you now as a publisher to check what name we have on file for you. You log into the Publisher Center, you make sure that the name in our database matches the name on your sitemap. The URL also has to match exactly. The URL of your sitemap also has to match exactly. So even a discrepancy in the www will make a difference. And it'll say that the name on your sitemap doesn't match the name that we have in our database. The other two things that have to match exactly are your language and country. So those four criteria have to match exactly what's on your sitemap and what's in our database. That's the most common error. Other than that, if you're still finding the error, please write into our team and we can take a look at that.
Okay, let's see. We have one here. In the news, Google News Publisher Help, it suggested that publishers don't use date or time in their headlines. Is this referring to numeric digits or an actual date time? Is a year or monetary digit in the title okay? Is the issue with digits in the URL?
Interesting. I'm trying to pull up that page to see the exact verbiage. We don't have any editorial guidelines. The last thing we want to do is tell you how to write your headlines. From a user perspective, I see the year in headlines all the time. The top stories of 2014, I've seen that in Google News hundreds of times. So that's definitely not a problem. Having years or dates in the URL should not be a problem in terms of article extraction. In fact, we do require that you have a unique set of at least 3 digits in your article URLs in order for us to crawl it. That's what we call the 3-digit rule. So if you wanted to ping, I think I closed the chat. Where did it go? If you would like to add the URL to that Help Center article, I can take a look at it. Or again, write into me, write into our team, and I can provide some further details on that.
All right, that kind of leads into the next question that just, oh gosh, where did it go? Here we go. How do you write into the Google News team? How do you contact you guys?
Excellent question. So within the Help Center, there's a tiny Contact Us button in the top right corner. And then it just leads you through a series of drop-downs so we can help categorize your issue, and myself or a member of our team will get back to you. But really the quickest way to get an answer is through the forum. Our TCs, shout out to our wonderful top contributors who are our product experts, will probably get back to you a lot faster than my team or I would in absolute candor. So you can also try the Google News Help Forum. Let me actually just put a link in the Hangout chat box. Okay, so that's the Google News Forum link.
Okay, I'll copy the URLs into the video description afterwards.
Oh, great. Thanks, John.
So that they're kind of visible there. Oh, wow, the questions keep bumping around. Could you please clarify why my website, coinspeaker.com, was rejected in Google News? We're working very hard to make it one of the best Bitcoin news websites of the world. Where can I get help?
The old, why was my site rejected question. Obviously, it's very much a case-by-case basis. And just as the news industry is evolving in what it considers a news site, Google News is closely monitoring that, making some really tough decisions on which sites are included and which sites aren't. Probably not the exact venue to go over your specific site, but if for those specific questions, actually, the forum is really the best spot to get specific advice. For kind of policy reasons, the Google News team doesn't provide very specific advice, because we found that in the past publishers would latch on to the little details that we suggested and say, okay, well, I fixed that or edited that. Now can I be accepted into Google News? It's a ton of different criteria that goes into accepting or rejecting a Google News site. But in the forum, the top contributors and anyone really can chime in and provide some really, really detailed, solid advice for how to improve the quality of your site and possibly get it accepted into Google News.
But brands can get accepted if they want to, right? If they have some really serious journalistic authors, or let's say helping like small businesses and so on. Would that be something? I mean, can a site like that get accepted? I'm not asking.
Brands? I missed the first part of your question.
Let's say a brand has a blog, right? Which you can accept. Can a brand also be accepted? Doesn't have to be news publishers.
Right, and a lot of times we find that there are companies or brands that are very much experts in certain fields or industries, and that they do provide fantastic quality news content. So what we'll do is we'll accept their news sections. And we really ask that publishers respect that they don't add their, sales page or other non-news sections to the Publisher Center. And there is frequent checks to make sure that only news content is crawled and indexed in Google News.
Okay, I mean, it's news, but at the same time, I'm still seeing like some news kind of act like blogs. I mean, it's not necessarily news.
Baruch, this is a fun back and forth. I think you ask every single person in this Hangout what is news and whether a certain site should be accepted in Google News, you'll probably get 11 different opinions. And that's what makes my job so interesting, but also really challenging. We accept blogs in Google News. We think they're great sources of information. They may not be defined as a news site for you or for me or for another member on my team, but blogs are, we found in this day and age, in this stage of Google News, that they provide valuable information to readers. So
Amazing.
those are accepted in Google News.
Thank you so much for the question. Thanks.
Sure.
All right, Barry, you had a question.
Yeah, so on that topic about sites that somebody might not consider to be news, using the editor's pick for that, I'm always cautious about ever even using it because I don't think that the average people are interested in if John's saying that link building should be dead or alive or whatever. I don't think, even though it's a huge topic for the search engine marketing community, it's something that average people don't really care about when ICE is out there and stuff like that. So what do publishers that are covering a very niche topic, should they stay away from using the editor's pick, or what do you recommend?
I always hesitate to give editorial advice, but we've seen, I can speak more on the quantitative side, what we see in terms of traffic. If you want potentially more traffic to your site, we recommend using editor's picks. If you like potentially converting new users to your site, we recommend using editor's picks. And that's why I wanted to use the case study of Gawker. You know, a pretty big media organization. They still found a lot of new users coming to their site. And what we tell publishers is that the best way to get in front of new users is to do editor's picks. The best way to build a more loyal following amongst your existing users is to create an editor's picks and then educate people on how they can see their editor's picks, to see the publisher's editor's picks more often. How you do that is you personalize your Google News homepage. So I use myself as an example. I love the New Yorker, so I personalized my homepage to make the New Yorker a preferred source, so that every time I log into Google News on my homepage, I'm much more likely to see the New Yorker's editor's picks widget. So it's really another feature you can add to your editorial strategy. We know there's a lot of those out there, not even from Google or Google News, but we think that it really does provide a lot of value to our publishers.
Thank you.
All right, Mihai, I think you had a question too, right?
Yeah. Hey, Stacy. I'm working with a fairly big publisher in the United States, and before the Google News, what's it called? The dashboard thingy. Basically, the publisher has a news section and a reviews section. And although the reviews are usually of products in their niche that are new, so they cover a review of on products recently launched, for example, they decided not to include those in the news sitemap, just to be sure there weren't any issues with Google not accepting them. So we only added the news section covering events and such relevant to the niche. So when the what was it called? The dashboard, the Google News.
The Publisher Center.
Publisher Center. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So when the Publisher Center was launched, I noticed that the website was included, and the news section was the one that was featured in the section. And well, not really an issue, but what I noticed was that the Google News the Google News bot was also crawling some of the reviews articles and featuring them in Google News. So those were outside the news section. And I didn't know what to do exactly. I asked on the help forum, so I decided in the end to also add the reviews section as a section in the Publisher Center. I guess this also is related to what's actually news, but since most of the reviews are related to new products, so it's basically op-ed pieces, is that fine? And what's also a bit of a separate question, would it be necessary to include a separate sitemap for each section, or would a single sitemap be sufficient?
That's a great question. So the first part, the reviews question, is very tricky. Again, I think if you asked every single person, is a review news? I think it depends on a lot of factors. I think if it's a very timely review of the iPhone 6, I think a lot of us would agree that that is news. I actually just found a link to the forum discussing this very topic. And I think for the most part, people agreed that reviews, if timely, are news. It's a very tough question. You did mention the op-ed tag. I think if it's a review, that would definitely be an opinion piece, and applying the op-ed label would be very appropriate to that. To your second question, can you submit a sitemap? Yes, you can submit as many new sitemaps as you like. You would just do that through Webmaster tools. But keep in mind, if you want us to do a sitemap only crawl, where we only pull articles from your sitemap, I have to see if we would be able to crawl more than one sitemap, if it is a sitemap only crawl. But you can submit as many sitemaps to your Webmaster Tools account.
Well, currently we added the reviews section in the sitemap as well. But my question was really, if a publisher notices that some of the articles that weren't included in the news sitemap were featured on Google News, should he go ahead, usually in the Publisher Center, and add that part of his website as a section, if he notices that Google already features some of the articles in that section?
Yes, you can add that section. I think unless you find that there are so many articles on that section that are not news, don't add that. But you should add that section and appropriately apply the op-ed label. And that's where we really do use those labels. A question that we get from publishers is, well, didn't Google News already know how to classify my articles? Yes and no. I think adding that section to the Publisher Center and applying that op-ed label to your review section will really help the product better classify your news articles.
Okay, that's cool.
Stacy, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Does Google follow the RSS feeds to find some of that news?
Yes, and you can add RSS feeds. I haven't thought about those in a long time. But yes, you can add RSS feeds to your Publisher Center.
Okay.
All right, there's still some more Google News questions. Does a text versus HTML code ratio affect Google News? Like if you have more text or more HTML code on a page, does that change anything for Google News?
Versus images or things like that? Sorry, I don't know where the questions are appearing.
So more like if you have a lot of markup on your pages and very little text, or if you have a lot of text and very minimalistic markup, does that change anything?
In terms of, I can only speak in terms of extraction. That's hard to say, like more or less. We do have certain rules for the minimum amount of text that you should have and the maximum amount. That is listed in our Help Center. Let me just ping the page on the chat window. It's such an ambiguous definition of more or less that I probably can't quantify it, but I will ping some definitions that'll be helpful in answering that question.
Okay, here's another one from India. Recently I got approval for our tech news website. Since its country is India, but our team also covers US tech updates, but our website never gets ranked in the US edition of Google News. So is there something that they could do there, or are they basically stuck in India?
Very good question. I went over in the presentation two criteria that are very important for us to determine which edition your site is in, the country and language. If you do feel that you have a very big US audience or a big French audience and you want to change that country, You would actually have to apply for inclusion for that specific site. And you would have to have a separate URL for that, because we can't extract articles and say, oh, this should go in the US edition or this should go in the India edition. So your site could be xyz.com/US and xyz.com/India. And you would have to have two separate accounts in Google News with us.
And does geo-targeting in Webmaster Tools affect that in any way, or is it just useful for search results, normal search results?
John, I think Mihai, are you asking, would you have to do anything differently in Webmaster Tools if you were to do that in Google News?
I think the geo-targeting setting is only for web search, not for Google News. So it doesn't select which edition it's shown in Google News.
Also, by the way, since you talked about minimum and maximum amount of text required for inclusion in Google News, talking about those op-ed pieces or reviews, some of them can usually go fairly long. So what's your recommendation about that? Should we maybe break it up into multiple articles, or just not bother with it?
I'm just looking at our page. We actually don't have like a word count limit for article too long. I don't know if I've ever seen an op-ed piece that was so long that we couldn't crawl it. I can't imagine an op-ed piece just as a reader being that long where Google News couldn't extract and index it. You could break it up into pieces. As a former journalist, I often do that with a lot of my articles just because it was a better reader experience. Without seeing a specific article, I can't really comment on like a max word length or if not it could be crawled. We do have a word count minimum that you do need. I think it's 80. Yeah, your articles have to be more than 80 words. But that's really our only concrete word count requirement.
Yeah, last time I checked the NASA articles, they're around 600-700. So.
I was asking because I think I did get a few errors that the article, there was too much text on that page, the article was too long, and it wasn't the new sitemap, and I think I got the error displayed right there, if I remember correctly. So I guess you can see that in Webmaster Tools if an article is too long.
One thing that we do see is the article too long error will often get generated because of user comments. It's not necessarily the words or the text that's too long, but it thinks the whole page is too long, not necessarily the content of your article. And so there are a few things that you could do. You could isolate your user comments. You could put them in an iframe. That's the easiest recommendation that we have. But it really isn't about, most of the time, it really isn't about the text of your article that's too long.
So do you, if you know the discuss commenting system, would you have recommendations for that? I'm not sure how Google manages to crawl it.
Ah, that's a good question, because I know a lot of publishers do use Discuss. I would have to take a look at that. I haven't seen an article recently that generated that error from Discuss comments, but good question. I'll get back to you on that.
All right. Olaf has a question.
Hi, thanks. My question is about dates in articles. There's a recommendation in the Help Center about that it says you shouldn't have more than one date in the HTML code. It's here. And now our editors are more and more often update the information in articles. Maybe something like a live blog, where you are live blogging a whole day or longer about very special events. And so they want to make visible for our readers when they published it and when they edited it. Is that a problem for Google News?
I see what you're saying. So now it's actually in the HTML code. Just quickly scanning that article. We really ask publishers to include the date when the article was first published. I do see what you're saying, because in this day and age with the internet, you can constantly update information to that article, and so we get a lot of questions, should we put the date of the most recent edit? We're still asking to put the date when the article first appeared on your site. Putting more than one date really does confuse the bot, and that's why people will ask us, why does my article say crawled 2-3 hours ago? It's not exactly when my article was first published. It's just a very tricky thing to get exactly right, because the life cycle of an article is constantly changing. So to reduce confusion for the bot, we ask to include the date of when the article was first published.
Okay, thanks.
And usually, I remember what I did as a journalist. I would just put it in the text of the article, like, updated at this time and this date. But really messing with the HTML code or editing it can potentially get confusing for the bot.
Do you, by HTML code, do you then mean what's in the head, the meta date? Okay, so it's not regarding the body.
I mean, that's more of an editorial thing, right? We will never tell you when you should write in update or edit in the body article, but in your header, you should really put when the article was first published.
Sure.
Okay, we have a question from Jane. Is it better to have the title and the H1 content be different, so the H1 heading? Google News indicate no, but some SEOs say yes, they should be different. Is this just a matter of the algorithm being different for Google Search and Google News?
I can only speak to Google News, John. You might be able to speak more about Google Search. Consistency is key. One thing we always try to get right is extracting your headline. And if there are different places on the page that point to different headlines, that's very confusing for the bot. And that's why we get publishers sometimes writing in like, oh, you guys got my headline wrong. And we say, well, because there's different parts of your page that say different things. So really trying to be consistent is the best way for us to correctly index your headline and then that snippet below. I can't comment on the SEO stuff, but if you're trying to signal to us that your article is about certain things, I believe we have things you can add in the meta tag. Was it keywords? I believe you can still use the keywords tag if you wanted to signal other topics that your article is about. But please, for consistency's sake, I would ask that the titles and the headlines remain the same wherever you're pointing to on your page.
All right, that kind of leads to the next question. Can you provide any additional guidance on using the news keywords tag? Specifically, is it used for direct query matching, or is it also used for classification? Any advice around that?
And I mentioned the keywords tag, and I probably shouldn't have because I'm not super expert on that. We do have a help center page about that. Let's see. We don't explain explicitly. I can actually dig more into that and see if there are any updates to the keywords help center page, and then I'll post that as a comment to this recording of the Hangout.
All right.
All right, we have one about duplicate content, which we always kind of have. I'm concerned about duplicate content, both cross-channel between our subdomains and external, supplied by news agencies such as Reuters, AFP, etc. At this point, a rel canonical is not feasible to pull off. So what would you recommend in a situation like that?
Darn it. Stole my suggestion. That's a very complex question. We get that from publishers a lot. But it's such a complex network now with news now living on the internet. Really, the rel canonical tag is what our team currently believes is the best way to handle all that. And I don't know what contractual agreements you sometimes have with your syndication partners. It really depends, but the best way is just to pick that main publication that should deserve the credit for their reporting or their article and point to that news site.
All right. Another one about news. Is it necessary to occasionally use third-party standouts in order for your own standouts to carry any weight?
Oh, great question. Yes. The standout tag is built on the ecosystem of publishers using the standout tag. So in a sense, you can build up credibility using the standout tag and referring to xyz.com rather than always referring to your site, abc.com. The only thing we ask is that you use the standout tag for your own site only 7 times per week. But really, you can link out to as many other third-party sites with the standout tag as frequently as you would like. In fact, we encourage it.
All right. There's a bunch of stuff in the chat here. I don't know, do any of you guys have any news-related questions left?
I have one about news sitemaps. Can you clarify if you use news sitemaps on anything other than allowing webmasters to check for any errors? Since I noticed you sometimes crawl outside the news sitemaps. So is it used for anything else than updating the webmaster if he has any issues?
Not that I can think of, John, if you wanted to add anything, but it acts like another news section, at least to the Google News bot. The only time it's very important is if you decide to do a sitemap only crawl, and that's exclusively where we're pulling articles from.
So I guess just from the sitemap side, that's almost the fastest way to get content to Google, in the sense that if we see it in a sitemap, you tell us about the change in your sitemap, and we pick that up, then we can jump and go to the server and pick that up directly and see what happened there, what changed, which pages are new, and follow that up directly. So I've seen situations where webmasters submit a sitemap file, and after 2-3 minutes, the URLs are already indexed. So that's really like fast-track way into Google's index almost.
Gotcha. Okay, that's a good point, John. Speed, yeah, that is a big benefit of submitting a sitemap.
Can we ask, like, are we allowed to talk about SEO for a minute? It's about mobile.
I have the next normal Webmaster Central Hangouts lined up next, so I'd recommend deferring it until there because we don't have much time left, and I think there's still some questions here. Zim has a question about company press release sites, English and French. Do they need to register twice?
Yes, if by register you mean apply to Google News. So again, if at any point your country or language is not just one country or one language, then yes, you do need to apply to Google News.
But the URL is the same for both.
What was that, a comment or a question that I heard?
Stacey, I just wanted to add, just for the viewers, on the keywords you mentioned a while ago, the tag for the meta tag, don't get them confused with the old meta keywords tag. It's a news keywords tag.
Robert, I just saw your name. Robert, I appreciate that. Yes, so I'll provide some education and language about that when I get up to date. Oh, okay, so the clarifying question was the URL is the same for both countries. Yes, so we'll actually need then a separate URL. So again, you'll need like xyz.com/fr and xyz.com/yen.
Okay, here's a quick question about sitemap index files. Chris uses a sitemap index file that has a Google News sitemap within it. It shows on Google News as submitted and the website submitted, but it doesn't show them as indexed, though they show up in Google News. So if the index count in Webmaster Tools for a Google News sitemap doesn't show up, is that a problem?
Yeah, John and I were just discussing this before the Hangout, actually. The index count isn't always accurate for Google News specifically. It's just a different beast, I would say. News articles are being indexed so much faster than a lot of regular sites that it's very hard to accurately capture that. So the best way that we recommend to see which articles are being indexed is just a simple site search in Google News, and then you'll see which articles are being crawled and which ones aren't.
I have a question about the video channels sections in Google News Publisher Center. For some reason, it says that I have like a YouTube channel in my source, and the only way that I could change it is to contact support. How do you guys handle YouTube URLs for sources?
Good question. Yeah, so because YouTube.com is not technically owned under your domain, you can't add that section to your Publisher Center. So to add a YouTube channel, you still need to write into our team.
And that would link my site to that YouTube channel, and it will be the same publisher? That's how it works?
Yeah. So it would show Search Engine Roundtable for any videos that appear in Google News once your YouTube channel is linked to your account.
Cool, thanks.
So that would be like treated like a blog or whatever, right? So if you...
No, I mean it wouldn't be treated any differently than an article on your site.
Wow.
The placement would be different. So your videos would likely appear in the media strip below the text articles, but you would get the same name. You wouldn't. We don't have a label because it appears in the media strip, and it wouldn't say anything like blog by the video. It would just be the name of your publication.
Okay.
All right. Looks like we're out of time. I bet we could go on for hours. Lots of good Google News questions here. Thank you all for your time so far, and thank you, Stacy, for all of the detailed answers and the presentation.
Absolutely, and to hold me accountable, I'd love to host another one soon. So I'll work with John to hopefully get another guest appearance spot on your guys' office hours. These are really fun, and I think hopefully informational and educational. All
right, thanks a lot. And with that, I wish you all a great day, and maybe we'll see you again next time, Stacy, or another time.
All right, thanks everyone. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.